Madame Tussauds is a wax museum in London with branches in a number of major cities. It was founded by wax sculptor Marie Tussaud. It used to be known as Madame Tussauds. The apostrophe is no longer used. Madame Tussauds is a major tourist attraction in London, displaying waxworks of famous people. History. Background. Marie Tussaud was born as Marie Groholtz in 1761 in Strasbourg, France. Her mother worked as a housekeeper for Dr. Philippe Curtius in Bern, Switzerland, who was a physician skilled in wax modeling. Curtius taught Tussauds the art of wax modeling. Tussauds created her first wax sculpture in 1777 of Voltaire. Other famous people whom she modeled at that time include Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Benjamin Franklin. During the French Revolution, she modeled many prominent victims. She claims that she would search through corpses to find the severed heads of executed citizens, from which she would make death masks. Her death masks were held up as revolutionary flags and paraded through the streets of Paris. She inherited the doctor's vast collection of wax models following his death in 1794, and spent the next 33 years traveling around Europe. She married François Tussauds in 1795, and the show acquired a new name, Madame Tussauds. In 1802, she accepted an invitation from Paul Philidor, a magic lantern and phantasmagoria pioneer, to exhibit her work alongside his show at the Lyceum Theatre, London. She did not fare particularly well financially, with Philidor taking half of her profits. She was unable to return to France because of the Napoleonic Wars, so she travelled throughout Great Britain and Ireland exhibiting her collection. From 1831, she took a series of short leases on the upper floor of Baker Street Bazaar, which later featured in the Drew Sportland case sequence of trials of 1898 to 1907. This became Tussauds' first permanent home in 1836. Origins. By 1835, Marie had settled down in Baker Street, London, and opened a museum. One of the main attractions of her museum was the Chamber of Horrors. The name is often credited to a contributor to Punch in 1845, but Marie appears to have originated it herself, using it in advertising as early as 1843. This part of the exhibition included victims of the French Revolution and newly created figures of murderers and other criminals. Other famous people were added, including Lord Nelson and Sir Walter Scott. Some sculptures still exist that were done by Marie Tussaud herself. The gallery originally contained some 400 different figures, but fire damage in 1925 coupled with German bombs in 1941 has rendered most of these older models defunct. The casts themselves have survived, allowing the historical waxworks to be remade, and these can be seen in the museum's history exhibit. The oldest figure on display is that of Madame du Barry. Other faces from the time of Tussauds include Robespierre and George III. In 1842, she made a self-portrait which is now on display at the entrance of her museum. She died in her sleep on the 15th of April 1850. By 1883, the restricted space and rising cost of the Baker Street site prompted her grandson Joseph Randall to commission the building at its current location on Marylebone Road. The new exhibition galleries were opened on the 14th of July 1884 and were a great success. However, Randall had bought out his cousin Louise's half-share in the business in 1881, and that plus the building costs meant that the business was underfunded. A limited company was formed in 1888 to attract fresh capital but had to be dissolved after disagreements between the family shareholders. A and Tussauds was sold to a group of businessmen in February 1889 led by Edwin Josiah Poyser. Edward White was an artist who was dismissed by the new owners to save money. He allegedly sent a parcel bomb to John Theodore Tussauds in June 1889. In revenge, the first sculpture of a young Winston Churchill was made in 1908, with a total of 10 made since. The first overseas branch of Madame Tussauds was opened in Amsterdam in 1970. Current status: Madame Tussauds Wax Museum has now become a major tourist attraction in London, incorporating the London Planetarium in its West Wing. Today's wax figures at Tussauds include historical and royal figures, film stars, sports stars, and famous murderers. It is known as Madame Tussauds Museums and is owned by a leisure company called Merlin Entertainments. Following the acquisition of the Tussauds Group in May 2007, in July 2008, Madame Tussauds Berlin branch became embroiled in controversy when a 41-year-old German man brushed past two guards and decapitated a wax figure depicting Adolf Hitler. This was believed to be an active protest against showing the ruthless dictator alongside sports heroes, movie stars, and other historical figures. However, the statue has since been repaired and the perpetrator has admitted that he attacked the statue to win a bet. The original model of Hitler was unveiled in Madame Tussauds London in April 1933. It was frequently vandalized and a 1936 replacement had to be carefully guarded. In November 2015, Madame Tussauds announced that it would open a museum in New Delhi in 2017. American singer Nicki Minaj's statue at the Las Vegas Museum was provided extra security following an act of vandalism by one of her fans who took some inappropriate photos in June 2015. In January 2016, the statue of Adolf Hitler was removed from the London Museum in response to an open letter sent by a staff writer of the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles, followed by significant support for its removal from social media. Museum's locations: Asia, China, Beijing, China; Chongqing, China; Hong Kong, China; Shanghai, China; Wuhan, China; India, New Delhi, India; Japan, Tokyo, Japan; Singapore, Singapore; Thailand, Bangkok, Thailand; Eurasia, Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey; Europe, Amsterdam, Netherlands; Berlin, Germany; Blackpool, United Kingdom; London, United Kingdom; Prague, Czech Republic; Vienna, Austria; North America, Hollywood, United States; Las Vegas, United States; Nashville, United States; New York, United States; Orlando, United States; San Francisco, United States; Washington, D.C., United States; Oceania, Sydney, Australia. In popular culture, celebrity poses with the wax figures. Many times celebrities pose like the wax figures as pranks and publicity stunts. On the 3rd of November 2009, the museum's New York City branch was featured in a segment on NBC's The Today Show in which weatherman Al Roker posed in place of his lifelike wax figure for 2 hours and startled unsuspecting visitors, who were at first led to believe they were viewing Roker's wax counterpart. In 2010, Ozzy Osbourne did similarly in New York to promote his Scream album. In 2012, One Direction posed as the statues in the London Museum as a prank for the TV series Surprise, Surprise. National Basketball Association players Carmelo Anthony and Jeremy Lin pranked fans during the unveiling of the statues at the New York and San Francisco museums, respectively. In 2015, Arnold Schwarzenegger posed as the Terminator statue in the Hollywood Museum to promote a charity event. Films in Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps. Mr. Hannay tells Pamela that his uncle is featured in Madame Tussauds' murderer section and that one day she will be able to take her children to Madame Tussauds to see him. Parts of the film Fan were shot at Madame Tussauds, making it the first Indian film to be shot there. Madame Tussauds features in the film Shanghai Nights. Games. Madame Tussauds is featured in an Assassin's Creed Unity side mission, where the player is tasked with retrieving the severed heads of which Madame Tussauds was commissioned to make replicas. Literature. There is a brief reference to Madame Tussauds' work in the Sherlock Holmes story, The Mazarin Stone. In Elizabeth Bowen's novel The Death of the Heart, Portia and Eddie have tea at Madame Tussauds and Portia is disappointed that the waitresses are real and not made of wax. Music. In Gilbert and Sullivan's song My Object All Sublime, from The Mikado, the title character sings of punishments fitting the crime, including the amateur tenor, whose vocal villainy is all desire to shirk, shall, during off-hours exhibit his powers to Madame Tussauds' waxwork. Madame Tussauds is the focus of Steve Taylor's song Meltdown, which describes someone turning up the thermostat and causing the wax figures to melt. The Beatles had the wax figures featured along with cardboard cutouts of various famous people in the cover art for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Several sculptures from the London branch appear in the music video Pop ULAR by singer-songwriter Darren Hayes. Madame Tussauds sculptures are used on the cover of Rick Wakeman's album The Six Wives of Henry VIII. A waxwork of Richard Nixon also appears in the background. Stage productions. Marie Tussaud is mentioned in The Scarlet Pimpernel. Television. The museum was featured on the History Channel's series Life After People. The series Tussauds appeared in an episode of Living TV's paranormal program Most Haunted. The Doctor Who serial Spearhead from Space features a scene at Madame Tussauds. Madame Tussauds in Las Vegas was featured in Travel Channel /Grotesque Ghost Adventures. In the Parks and Recreation episode Indianapolis, Leslie Knope mentions the misshapen Celebrity Palace, a fictional tourist trap where Madame Tussauds sends the failed wax figures. Madame Tussauds is mentioned in the American-British drama series Penny Dreadful, Season 2, Episode 1. Celebrities. Gallery.